No light reaches 7 miles down. Pressure there can crush steel in seconds. Nothing with a spine was ever supposed to survive it. Then a small research team, armed with nothing but robotic cameras and a lot of patience, pointed their equipment straight into that darkness anyway. What came back up did not match anything scientists had written in the textbooks. The Mariana Trench sits in the western Pacific Ocean near the island of Guam, stretching about 1,500 miles long. Its lowest point, called the Challenger Deep, reaches about 10,935 meters down, close to 36,000 feet. If Mount Everest were dropped into that spot, its peak would still sit more than a mile underwater. Sunlight stops reaching the ocean at around 1,000 meters. Everything past that line is total darkness, all the time, with no exceptions. At the bottom, the pressure is more than 1,000 times what a person feels standing at sea level, roughly the same as having 100 elephants pressing down on every square inch of your body. Keep that number in mind because every single thing on this list had to survive or somehow slip past that same crushing weight. The first item on the list almost broke science's whole understanding of what a fish can handle. For most of history, scientists figured fish simply could not survive much past 8,000 meters. The pressure would break down proteins in their bodies faster than they could repair themselves. That idea held up for a long time, until 2014, when cameras filming near the bottom of the trench caught a pale, wide-bodied fish gliding through the dark at a depth deeper than any fish had ever been filmed. Researchers studied it for years. In 2017, they gave it a name in the science journal Zootaxa, Pseudoleparus swirae, now known as the Mariana snailfish. It was found more than 8,000 meters down, making it one of the deepest living vertebrates ever confirmed on camera. The snailfish has no scales and no swim bladder. Its bones are thin and its body is soft and almost see-through, so its organs are visible from the outside. On the surface, a snailfish pulled up from that depth looks deformed and shapeless because its entire body only holds together properly under the crushing weight it evolved for. Part of its trick is a chemical called trimethylamine oxide, which builds up in its cells and stops its proteins from getting crushed under the pressure. The deeper a fish lives, the more of this chemical it seems to carry, almost like the ocean has a built-in limit on how far down life can push itself before its own body gives out. That fish proves something with a spine could survive at a depth once thought impossible. But scientists were about to find something even stranger sitting quietly in the mud nearby, something so simple it barely counts as an animal at all. Most single-celled organisms are so small you need a microscope just to notice them. In July 2011, a research team from Scripps Institution of Oceanography lowered an unmanned camera device called a drop cam into the Mariana Trench and found something that broke that rule completely. They discovered xenophyophores, a type of giant amoeba, sitting at depths up to 10,641 meters in an area of the trench called the Sirena Deep. These creatures can grow past 10 centimeters, about 4 inches, making them among the largest single-celled organisms ever found on the planet. You could see one sitting on the seafloor with your own eyes, no lab equipment needed. Scripps deep sea biologist Lisa Levin called them fascinating giants that are highly adapted to extreme conditions, but also very fragile and poorly studied. Later research found that xenophyophores can soak up and hold on to heavy metals like lead, uranium, and mercury from the water around them, which may be part of why they can handle such a brutal environment without falling apart. Before this discovery, the previous depth record for these giant cells was set in the New Hebrides Trench at about 7,500 meters. The Mariana find beat that by nearly 2 miles. A single cell, doing nothing more complicated than sitting in the mud, was somehow tougher than almost anything else scientists could throw pressure gauges at. If a single cell can hold its shape under that kind of crushing weight, it starts to raise a bigger question. What happens when whole colonies of animals try to build a life down there instead of just one lonely cell surviving alone? Almost everything alive on Earth depends on sunlight in one way or another, whether directly through photosynthesis or indirectly through eating something that eats plants. Scientists assumed that rule held everywhere, including the deep ocean floor. Then, in 2025, a Chinese submersible called Fenduje, meaning striver, completed 23 dives into the Mariana Trench and found something that broke that assumption apart. The team discovered thousands of worms and mollusks living nearly 10 kilometers below the surface, described as the deepest colony of creatures ever observed on the planet. Footage showed fields of tube worms growing up to 30 centimeters long, along with clams, spiky crustaceans, sea cucumbers, and feathery armed sea lilies, all clustered together in complete darkness, packed in tighter than anyone expected life to gather at that depth. None of these animals rely on sunlight at all. Instead, they survive through a process called chemosynthesis, living off chemicals like methane that seep up through cracks in the seafloor. Scientists called it the discovery of the deepest and most extensive chemosynthesis-based community known to exist anywhere on Earth. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. An entire hidden ecosystem had been quietly feeding itself on leaking chemicals from inside the planet, completely cut off from the sun that powers nearly everything else alive. That discovery alone would be strange enough on its own. But it turns out this hidden world was not as untouched as it looked, because something else had already beaten scientists down there. In 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo became the fourth person in history to reach the Challenger Deep, piloting a submersible called the Limiting Factor. During his 4-hour dive, he spotted new sea creatures, colorful rocky outcrops, and translucent sea cucumbers, nicknamed sea pigs. He also spotted a plastic bag and candy wrappers sitting on the seafloor. This was not the first time. A 2018 study that reviewed a database of more than 5,000 previous deep-sea dives had already found a plastic bag sitting at roughly 36,000 feet, right at the deepest known point in any ocean on the planet. Vescovo called what he saw obvious human contamination of the deepest spot on Earth. 7 years earlier, in 2012, filmmaker James Cameron had piloted his own solo submersible, the Deep Sea Challenger, to that same seafloor and described the landscape as flat, featureless, and almost entirely empty of visible life. He did not mention seeing any trash at all. Whatever showed up by 2019 had arrived sometime in between. Human garbage reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench before most people had even heard that a deep-sea ecosystem existed down there at all. That fact alone is strange enough, since it means the hardest place on the planet to reach is already not untouched. But the trash was not just sitting there quietly. It turns out the pollution had already worked its way inside the animals living nearby. In 2017, a team led by Dr. Alan Jameson at Newcastle University set baited traps for small shrimp-like scavengers called amphipods, collecting them from both the Mariana Trench and the Kermadec Trench near New Zealand. The traps came up from depths between 7,000 and 10,500 meters. What the team found in the lab shocked even the scientists who had spent their careers studying deep sea life. Every single sample from every species at every depth in both trenches contained polychlorinated biphenyls, known as PCBs, along with polybrominated diphenyl ethers, known as PBDES. PCBs are industrial chemicals once used in paint, plastics, and electrical equipment, and most countries banned them back in the 1970s because they cause cancer. PBDES are flame-retardant chemicals still being phased out today. The amphipods pulled from the Mariana Trench had PCB levels higher than crabs living in two of the most polluted rivers in China, the Pearl River and the Liao River. Jameson explained it simply. Garbage dumped into the ocean eventually sinks, and once pollution falls into a trench, it has nowhere else to go, so it just keeps piling up over time, decade after decade, with nothing ever carrying it back up. Chemicals banned by governments before some of these scientists were even born had traveled thousands of miles and sunk 7 miles down into animals nobody had ever tested before. And PCBs were not the only human-made material these tiny scavengers were carrying around inside them. Amphipods are small shrimp-like animals that scavenge anything that falls to the seafloor, stripping it clean within hours. Researchers studying amphipods from 6 different deep-sea trenches, including the Mariana, tested their digestive systems for tiny plastic fragments known as microplastics. Every single sample tested had ingested microplastics. Not most samples, not the majority, every one. That means even the most remote scavengers on the planet, animals living farther from human civilization than almost anything else alive, are already eating human trash before scientists have even finished cataloging every species down there. One especially large species of amphipod, called Alicella gigantea, can grow up to 13 inches long, big enough to see clearly without any lab equipment at all. Even a creature that size, thriving in total darkness under crushing pressure, was not able to avoid the plastic drifting down from the surface world above it. Every item on this list so far has come from cameras, robotic landers, or scientific sampling equipment. The 7th and final thing on this list is different. It was seen by 2 human eyes from inside a steel sphere, and nobody has ever been able to confirm or deny what those eyes actually saw. On January 23, 1960, Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh climbed into a steel diving sphere called the Trieste and sank toward the Challenger Deep. The descent took about 5 hours. Partway down, at roughly 9,400 meters, a loud bang shook the whole vehicle. The 2 men checked every gauge inside the cabin, found nothing obviously wrong, and kept going anyway, since turning back that deep was barely an option once they had gone that far. They touched bottom and stayed for only about 20 minutes. In that short window, both men reported seeing what looked like a flat fish resting on the seafloor beneath them. Scientists have argued about that sighting for decades because almost nothing was expected to survive at a depth where the pressure could flatten a truck many times over. Nobody has ever fully confirmed or dismissed what those 2 men said they saw. That bang from earlier turned out to be a cracked outer window, serious enough to force the mission to end early. A cracked window at that depth does not mean a slow leak. It means total failure within seconds. Piccard and Walsh became the only 2 human beings ever to look at the floor of the Challenger Deep with their own eyes, and for more than 50 years afterward, nobody else tried to repeat what they had done. 7 things, 7 different reasons none of them should be down there. A fish surviving pressure that should crush it. A single cell bigger than a human thumb. An entire ecosystem living without ever seeing sunlight. A plastic bag beating scientists to the most remote point on the planet. Banned chemicals from the 1970s showing up in animals that never left the deep sea. Microplastics inside every single scavenger tested. And a flatfish sighting from 1960 that science still cannot fully explain. Space is vast and cold, but it mostly just sits there, waiting to be reached. The bottom of the ocean is different. It is already active, already hiding animals nobody expected to exist, and already collecting human trash before scientists finish naming what lives down there. Every time something manages to get close enough to look, it comes back with proof that the trench is stranger and far less empty than anyone assumed. If this video gave you something, subscribing takes 3 seconds and it helps us keep making content like this.